All right. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Able Speaks podcast as we continue in this series around caregiving. And specifically in this episode, want to talk about, as we've talked offline with some of our caregiving families, the notion of just what that calling looks like, specifically that of caregiving really being a sacred calling is something that comes up in language that we found just really compelling. And so we are joined by the Musser family and the Scuderi family. And so would love to pose that to you guys and maybe start with you guys, Mussers, as that has come up. As you approach caregiving for Izzy on an ongoing basis as a sacred calling, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's definitely been something that we have grown to learn to understand, if that makes any sense. Early on, I think we maybe just gotten Izzy's diagnosis, and my cousin connected us to a mom who had a trisomy 18 son up in Cincinnati who lived for 4 days. And so she was kind of walking through some of what that was. And she said something to us that was just really impactful, where she just kind of laid out like, God chose you for this role of being Izzy's parents. And we were just super overwhelmed with like all the medical decisions and all the information and everything coming at us. And she basically just said, like, walk in that authority. Like, God chose you for this. Now all you got to do is live that out. And he's already ahead of you. And so it's just something really transformative in hearing that, like, okay, this is where we are. It's time to, make decisions as best we can on the information we have, knowing that God has chosen us. And this is kind of our calling right now. What were you gonna?
Yeah. And as we're processing and living through what does this caregiving journey being a sacred calling mean, it's been a really helpful resource, the book Grace Disguised, written by Jerry Sittser, who talks about facing your suffering and how, although that's painful, it also puts you out on the other end where you actually experience and see beauty in an even more, in a deeper way. And so the idea that simple moments become really sacred because we don't take them for granted as much anymore. And so I've processed the idea of this being a sacred calling, even in the day-to-day moments, realizing, life is different for us now that we have the opportunity to caregive Izzy and that God's given us that authority. And therefore, all of these simple moments that I didn't even really stop to think about are really sacred and holy moments and blessings from God.
I love that. What, I think on that note, and then I'd love to hear from you, Scuderi's also, but so that's like specific to Izzy, right? How have you guys seen that impact other parts of your life? Just the notion of like really seeing kind of the mundane moments of life, is kind of what you're saying, as more like holy moments, and moments that really matter, and seeing the beauty in those things on a day-to-day basis. What does that look like outside of just caring for Izzy? How has that impacted y'all's life?
Big question. We're digesting.
Yes.
Yeah, so the idea of a sacred calling and how that's lived out in our day-to-day lives. Certainly, there's an aspect of how this has impacted those around us that we're closest to. And it's also been an internal and spiritual level processing as well, of understanding maybe more of our theology of suffering and developing that more. I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry, Kelly.
No, it does. Yeah, no, I think that it's just I think when you're kind of in the valley, if you will, of like, man, it feels like one day at a time, and each day is a challenge, in its own unique way. It's like, hey, these are the mundane, what we might have considered mundane moments that we're like grateful that we get to have with her, with Izzy. But then I think there's also aspects of our daily life. Like for Daniel and I think it's like that has impacted how we, parent our other kids. It's like, oh, I probably wouldn't have seen what a special moment something was with like our other children that we had after Abel. But because he taught us like, oh no, there is such beauty in just these simple things that we didn't get to do with him. I think that getting to do that with our other kids. So that's just like a way that having that perspective, I think, has like impacted other relationships, kind of like you were saying, Katie, or other aspects of our life in ways that I didn't expect, I guess, originally.
Yeah, that's certainly true. We felt that even like coming home from the hospital one day after having Izzy's diagnosis, and just both of us being overwhelmed by the fact that like our other girls could just run up to us and give us hugs. And there was this moment of like things that we took for granted that we just assumed would happen are a lot more on the forefront of like, wow, we just cannot even take for granted like the gift of these girls that don't have these kind of diagnoses, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think just those things become, it's like, oh no, this is like such a gift, but they're things that maybe I would have just expected if we hadn't had Abel. And it's like, oh yeah, well, every kid starts crawling, every kid starts walking, every kid starts talking, and it's like, oh, actually that's not the case. And this is like such a gift from God. So that was kind of, my thoughts on that. But Scuderi, what about for you guys?
So when I think of parenting a child with special needs as a sacred calling, I feel like it really brings you to a place of constant surrender, but also genuinely walking with the Lord. You have, and you're given so many opportunities to surrender in that moment, whether you're trying to control a situation, or you are fearful because your child is sick again, or you are unsure in that moment of what the future looks like in 2 months because you've been battling something. So it gives you that really intimate relationship with the Lord. And as you're trying to decide, what big decisions to make for your child, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? And then you remind yourself, like, God picked you for this. God loves your child so much more than you possibly could ever imagine. And if you continue to invite him into that space, these hard and heavy decisions and these hard moments are going to be okay. And they're not so scary and they're not so intimidating. So to be able to look at something as suffrage or a very long, hard, painful trial, when you walk with the Lord, it's a little easier to navigate when you remove yourself and you ask the Lord, I know this is your daughter. What do you want us to do with her? What should we do next? I trust you. If you are going to heal her on this side of heaven, fantastic. You've blessed me with more time. But if you are going to take her, then I know that I will get to see her again. And you are still going to continue to work with us. And you are going to take care of her far better than I possibly ever could. So it's very special because unless you're having to surrender and deal with something hard, it's sometimes in the day-to-day bustle of life, you can walk through life and forget about the Lord or forget to be intentional with your relationship with him. But here you don't have a choice. Like this, you want to survive and make it through. You're going to continue to invite him into all of the hard spots.
Yeah. Well, amen to that. We were kind of talking about this a little bit this weekend, I guess. Just why we felt like, maybe we were chosen to journey this way, and what that means for us, and just being able to just share Evalyn with the world and share her with like everybody that we know, and to be able to share our stories. And for me, my faith journey started shortly before Evalyn was born, and really kind of emphasized after her birth. And so the sacredness for me comes from a passage our preacher taught on right before the sermon before Evalyn was born. John chapter 1, like 1-3, verses 1-3 stick out, where he's talking about Jesus is the light, and everything was made through him, and nothing was made without him. And so sitting in the hospital with Evalyn, and even up late at night with Evalyn as she's crying or anything, I mean, even just sleeping, like she was made through him, and she was made perfect through that, and she was made exactly how he intended her to be, and how that impacts our life, and impacts our stories, and just impacts people around us, and just gives us opportunity to share the gospel. And we've both just kind of been in agreement that, like, she was given to us, but she's his child, and she's going to do great things for him. And that's kind of our duty, is to share about her and share the word.
Yeah. And just that the Lord wrote these kids into human history intentionally and with purpose, and with redemptive purposes, in the ways that, the differences that are evident, the challenges associated with that, this side of eternity, just to see such powerful evidence of him at work in and through our kids, all that it teaches, all that he reveals more about himself to us through our kids, and really to the watching world. And so you guys have done just such a beautiful job, both of y'all, just by stewarding, by sharing Evalyn's story and Izzy's story, that those are blessings that other people have been privy to as well. And I think one of the things that I heard from both of y'all kind of emphasize, which is so relevant in any number of contexts, is just, I think we can associate spiritual intimacy or connectedness with God, with like the highs of kind of those like metaphorical, like mountaintop moments of everything is just perfect and pristine, and it's something you'd see on an Instagram highlight reel, and it's like, oh man, those are the moments where God's just so present, and can I just go back there? And I'm hearing y'all through your story of the calling that he's placed on you as parents to Evalyn and to Izzy of, yes to all that, but it's every bit as real and present and powerful in the day-to-day, seemingly mundane things that you'd never think to take a picture and share with anybody. But it's, Kelly says often, just it can feel like holy ground. His presence can feel palpable even in the things that if you don't have eyes to see it, you'll miss it. And so many of us do in so many contexts in our life. And so before we dive into some of the more practical questions here, as far as the day-to-day and the week-to-week of caregiving, we just thought it was important to start with that big picture perspective. And so thank you guys for articulating that so well. And excited to hear more from you guys as far as just kind of following in your footsteps and being invited into your world a little bit. And so bless you guys. Super pumped to talk more. And that'll wrap up this episode of the Able Speaks podcast. We'll catch you next time.